go. Today is June 16th, 2025, where we are doing Parshat Shlach Lecha. This is Parshat Shlach Lecha, and we're going to focus specifically on the beginning of the Parsha, which is the spies. And this is a real turning point in the Torah. It's after this incident that the people are sentenced to 40 years of wandering in the desert. The story presents itself with so many, powerful questions. And as usual, there are some stories within the details. And I want to, when I read a story, I kind of hone in on things that draw my attention and make me curious, and therefore I ask a lot of questions. And I have a certain idea of where I want to go with this. I try to research things within the context of both the Bible and outside the Bible, and draw my conclusions. And for this class, I asked all of these questions to AI, ChatGPT, and on the one hand, I got some very, very fascinating answers, which almost tells me that I don't need to do anything anymore, which is startling, and tells me also that the necessity of a person to teach you is more urgent than ever. So I want to say, notwithstanding the fact that we are in this radically disjunctive moment in the world, right, with everything going on, that we are in a radically disjunctive moment on every level, politically, politically, economically, spiritually, religiously, everything. And the war that is going on is part of a larger set of transformations that we are experiencing in real time. I suspect that the news will be tomorrow, be different tomorrow and the rest of the week. We will be at the end of the week in a radically different world. It may be that soon. Radically, I'm maybe exaggerating here, but things are changing, and they're not only changing geopolitically, they're changing technologically, and the seeds for some other kinds of changes are happening, and I'm kind of funneling all of that into how we talk about the Torah. So here we go. Here is my text for today. It's the text of the spies, and I'm going to bring it up right now. Here we go. I'm going to share the screen. If you're making noise, okay. Here we go. So this is the Everett Fox translation. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe, saying, Shlach lecha anashim, send for yourself men, vayaturu et eretz Canaan, that they may scout out the land of Canaan, asher ani noten livnei Yisrael, that I'm giving to the children of Israel, ish echad lematav otav tishlachu kol nasivahem, one man per tribe of their fathers are you to send, each one a leader among them. Okay? So I had a whole conversation a few weeks ago about what a Rosh Av is, Lamate Avotav, and that a tribe, the tribe is a category of demarcation in the people, and we'll set that whole conversation aside. Paran, al pi Adonai. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran by order of God. The wilderness of Paran is evidently maybe 100 miles to the south of the Negev. Kulam anashim rashei b'nei Yisrael. All of the men of standing, heads of children of Israel, were they. And here are the names. Ela Shmotam. I love their names, so I love the music of their names. למטה ראובן שמוע בן זכור, למטה שמעון שפט בן חורי, למטה יהודה כלב בן יפונה, למטה יששכר יגאל בן יוסף, למטה אפרים משה בן נון, למטה בנימין פלטי בן רפול, למטה זבולון גדי בן צודי, למטה יוסף, למטה מנשה גדי בן סוסי, למטה דן עמיאל בן גמלי, למטה אשר סטור בן מיכאל, למטה נפתלי נחבי בן ובסי, למטה Gad, Geuel ben Machi, Eile Shemot Anashim. These are the names of the men who Moses sent out to scout out the land. Moses called Hoshea son of Nun, Yoshua. What I always find interesting in talking about the names is that already the construction of the name is different. When you compare the majority of the names of the tribal chieftains to these names, they sound differently. I almost like to say the same way that generationally, even in American Jewish life, names go through various periods of popularity, and you don't hear anybody named Irving anymore. Bertha, Gertrude, those names are passé, but you now have more Hebraic names, and that the social history of names is itself a fascinating discussion, which we will leave aside. Vayishlach otam Moshe latour et Eretz Canaan. Now it gets interesting. Moses sent them out to scout the land of Canaan. Vayomer alehem, and he says to them, and again, I can't help but feel the music and the poetry of these lines. Haluzeh v'negev, go up to the Negev. V'alitem et ahar. Nice parallelistic phrase. Alu v'alitem, go up, go up. Uritem et aretz mahi, see the land what it is. V'et ha'am hayoshev ala, the people settled on it. And now the questions. Hechazaku arafeh, hamat hu imrav, is the people on the land strong? Are they many? Okay. Uma ha'aretz asher hu yoshev ba, and what is the land? Hatova hi imra, is it good or bad? Uma ha'arim asher hu yoshev bahena, and what are the cities? Hab machanim im b'mivsarim, are they settled with encampments where they are settled therein? Are they where their encampments are fortified places? Uma ha'aretz, and what is the land? Ashmenahi imraza, is it fat or lean? Hayesh ba'etz im ayin, are there trees or not? V'itchazaktem, but you shall be strong, exert yourself. Ulekachtem mipri ha'aretz, take from the fruit of the land. And there should be a period there, okay? But we got a dash. And the dash is kind of the narrator's little comment, Vayamim yemei bikurei anavim. This season, the time here is the time of the first ripe grapes, and I'm going to push the reason for this intrusion. Okay, so we're going to get grapes later in the story, and what we have here is a seasonal posting, and we'll get to more precision on that in a second. Okay, I'm going to continue reading the story because it just gets better. Vayalu, they went up, they scouted the land. Vayaturu et haaretz, from the wilderness of Sin as far as Rechov, coming toward Hamat. Vayalu v'negev, they went up through the Negev. Vayavor Chevron, they went to Chevron. V'sham Achiman Sheshai v'Talmai Yelidei Anak, there were Achiman Sheshai and Talmai, the descendants of the Anakites. Sheva Shanim Nivnata, the Lifnei Tzoan Mitzrayim. Hebron had been built 7 years before Tzoan of Egypt, another seemingly kind of footnote. Vayavo Nachal Eshkol, they came to the Wadi of the Eshkol clusters. Vayichratu Misham Zmora, and they cut down there a branch. Ve'eshkol Anavim, and a cluster of grapes, one cluster of grapes. Vayisa'uhu Bamot, and don't pay attention to this translation, I'm going to dispute this translation. Vayisa'uhu Bamot Bishnayim, they carried it on a pole with two people. That is the grape cluster. Umin harimonim, and also of pomegranates, umin hate'inim, and they took figs. Lamakomahu, they called the place Nachal Eshkol, Al Odot Ha'Eshkol Asher Kartu Misham Ibnei Israel. That place was called the Wadi of Clusters on account of the cluster that the children of Israel cut down there. They returned from scouting there, the land, and the 40 days. All I want to say here is that we have, you don't have to be a scholar of the Bible to hear that some editor, somebody here is adding their footnotes, right? That it was a day of the grapes. They were these people. They were those people, and it was named this, right? So I imagine this is, in the oral tradition, someone say, and that's why we have the name blank, right? Because the text is never going to go back and explain this, and the purpose of the story is not, in the technical sense, etiological. Etiological is a fancy word for saying, here's the reason why this name was given to this place. So the story is not a story about the origin of the place as much as is a story about the 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 crisis in the desert. They returned after 40 days. Vayelchu vayavo el Moshe ve'el Aaron. They came and they went before Moses and Aaron, vel kol adat bnei Israel, to Moses and all the children of Israel, El Midbar Paran Kadesha, to the children of Israel in the wilderness of Kadesh. Vayashivu atam et kol davar. They returned to them and to the entire community. Vayerum et pri haaretz, and they let them see the fruit of the land. So I have another kind of idea about this story, which developed elsewhere again, is that there is a certain kind of ceremonial receiving of the delegates, and this is the report of the journey. And there's a deep anthropological experience here when someone goes somewhere and returns and they tell you about it. I had this understanding. I came to this understanding when after October the 7th, a couple of months later, we invited Rabbi Bennett Miller to come to the synagogue, and he reported on his trip, right? And obviously it was a unique time. He came, I think it was November or December, early December, just a couple of months later, just as the swelling of the protests for the hostages was beginning, and he reported, and it's not that we received him with fanfare, but if you think about it, here's a special guest, came to our bima, had a special introduction, had a special speech. He wrote his speech. He delivered his speech. There was emotional response. There was, for all intents and purposes, a ceremonial aspect to the reception. And we have that still as part of our human nature whenever we return from a journey. Whenever we come back from a journey, I mean, we don't show fruit necessarily, although you'll see examples of this in a second. What we do, we used to be. I mean, my mother's. I muted her and put the video on, and I'm sure many of you had these experiences where people came back from trips. They got the film developed, okay, and we couldn't wait till the slides came back in the mail, okay, because you sent out the film and the slides came back, or later on you picked them up at the whatever, the Photoshop, and then you put them in the projector, and then you had a slideshow. And the slideshow was all about the trip. And I certainly have memories of that. My parents coming from trips and telling about the trip because of all the pictures that they took. And today, and we still have some of that, but our whole experience of photography is different. Nobody, first of all, very few of us print our pictures anymore. Nobody does slideshows on a projector, like, in a ceremonial way. At very most, we kind of flip through, our phones or our iPads and show the thing. The computer has all sorts of software to make slideshows for you if you want to make a show and put music to it. But that's the extent of it. It's not as it's a whole different experience. Point is, when you come back, you want to show and tell. You want to show and tell, or tell and show. All right. So here's what goes on. Vaisaprulo. They told him, Vayomru, Banu el haaretz. We came to the land. Asher shalachtanu, till you that you said to us, that you sent us to. V'gam zavat chalav udvash. Yes, it's flowing with milk and honey. V'zeh pirya. And here's its fruit. Bam, 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 bam. Efes ki az ha'am hayoshev haaretz v'arim b'tzorot gdolot מאוד, v'gam yedidei hanak rainu sham. Except that powerful are the people that are set on the land. The cities are fortified exceedingly large, and the descendants of Anak did we see there. Amalek is settled in the land of land. The Hittite, the Jebusite, the Amorite are settled in the highlands. The Canaanite is settled by the sea and hard by the Jordan. Now Caleb hushed the people before Moshe and said, "Let us go up, yes, go up and possess it, for we can prevail, yes, prevail against it." But the men who went up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the population, for it is stronger than we." So they gave out a false report of the land, and they had scouted out to the children of Israel, saying, "The land we crossed through to scout it out, it is a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people that we saw in its midst are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the children of Anak. We were in our eyes like grasshoppers, and thus we were in their eyes." Lots to say about that. We'll pass. And the reaction, the community lifted up and let up their voice, and the people wept on the night. They grumbled against Moshe and against Aaron, all the children of Israel. They said to them, the entire community, "Would that we had died in the land of Egypt or in the wilderness. Would that we had died. Now why is God bringing us to the land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" So they said, "Let each one of us to his brother, let us go back and return to Egypt." Moses and Aaron flung themselves on their faces before the entire assembled community of the children of Israel. Now Yoshua of Nun and Caleb and Yehudah said, scattered them, they tore their garments. They said to the entire community of the children of Israel, saying, "The land that we crossed through to scout it out, good is that land, exceedingly, exceedingly. If God is pleased with us, he will bring us to the land and give it to us, a land that is flowing with milk and honey. But against God do not rebel, and you do not be afraid of the people of the land, for food for us are they. Their protector has turned away from them, and God is with us. Do not be afraid of them." But the entire community of Israel intended to pelt them with stones. Now the glory of God was seen at the tent of appointment by all the children of Israel. And God said to Moses, "Until when will this people scorn me? Until when will they not trust in me, despite all the signs that I have done among them? Let me strike it down with pestilence and dispossess it, and I will make of you a nation great and mightier than it." But Moshe said to God, "When they hear about it, the Egyptians, that you brought up this people with the power from its midst, they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you are God in the midst of this people, that eye to eye you were seen, O God, with your cloud standing over them, in a column of cloud going before them by day, and in a column of fire by night. But should you put this people to death as one man, then will say the nations that have heard of your fame, saying, was it from want of God's ability to bring this people into the land about which he swore to them, and so he slaughtered them in the wilderness? So now pray, let the power of my Lord to forbear be great, as you have promised, saying, God, long-suffering and much loyalty, bearing away iniquity and transgression, yet clearing, not clearing the guilty, calling to account the iniquity of the fathers upon the sons, and to the third and fourth generation. Grant pardon for the iniquity of this people, as your loyalty is great, just as you have been bearing it for this people from Egypt until now. And God said, I grant pardon according to your words. However, as I live, and as the glory of God fills the earth, indeed, all the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tested me these 10 times, have not hearkened to my voice, if they should see the land about which I swore to their fathers. All who have scorned me will not see it. But as for my servant Caleb, because there was another spirit in him, and he followed me fully, I will bring him into the land that he is about to enter, and his seed will possess it. Now the Amalekite and Canaanite are settled in the lowlands. On the morrow, face about and march into the wilderness by the Reed Sea road. And God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Until when will this community, that they stir up grumbling against me, the grumblings of the children of Israel, that they grumble against me, I have heard. Say to them, as I live, the utterance of God, if not, as you have spoken in my ear, thus I do to you. In this wilderness your corpses shall fall, all of you counted for battle, including all your number, from the age of 20 and upward, who have grumbled against me. If any of you should enter the land over which I lifted my hand in an oath to have you dwell in it, except for Caleb son of Yefuneh and Joshua son of Nun. Your little ones, whom you said would become plunder, I will let them enter, and they shall come to know the land that you have spurned. But your corpses, yours, shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall graze in the wilderness 40 years. Thus shall they bear your whoring, until your corpses come to an end in the wilderness. According to the number of days that you scouted the land, 40 days, a year, each day a year, you are to bear your iniquities 40 years. Thus will you know my hostility. I am God, I have spoken. If I do not do this to the whole evil community that has come together against me, in this wilderness they will come to an end. There they will die. So the men whom Moshe had sent to scout the land returned and caused the entire community to grumble against them by bringing a false report about the land. The men died. Those bringing a report of the land, an ill one in a plague before the presence of God. But Yoshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Yefuneh, remained alive from those men who had gone to scout out the land. Moshe spoke all these words to the children of Israel. The people mourned exceedingly. They started early in the morning, went up to the top of the highlands, saying, Here we go, here we are, let us go and attack the place that God promised where we have sinned. But Moses said, Why now do you cross the order of God? It will not succeed. Do not go up, for God is not in your midst, that you not be defeated by your foes. For the Amalekite and the Canaanite are there to face you, and you will fall by the sword. For since you have turned from following after God, God will not be with you. But they went up recklessly to the top of the highlands, while the ark of the covenant of God and Moses did not move from the camp, and the Amalekite and Canaanite were settled in the highlands, came down, they struck and crushed them near Hormah. Okay, and that's the story. I'm sorry. I went through, one second. I went through the whole story. I see you, Nanette. I see Susie. I went through the whole story, and to get to the ending. Um, and I mean, we could spend a whole class just generating questions on the story, but I'll stop here and take just two questions at least. Here, go, Susie, and then Nanette.
Yeah. So you have the spies go up, they come back, they give a report on what they saw. They talk about the people, they talk about the land. There's a disagreement about what they can do about the people, but there's another thing that they say that seems not to be supported by the evidence, and that's Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha.
Okay, I'm going to set that question aside. It's a complicated question. It means a land that devours its inhabitants. It means a lot of different things, including the wildness of the land. And I find that explanation very compelling, just in a nutshell, that wild animals are there, and the wild animals devour their inhabitants. Lions, bears, not bear, but wild boars and other predatory animals. So that's what that means. And so what you're getting here, I'm going to, again, in condensed form to answer this question, is a statement of the state of the land. Is the land developed, and how developed is it? Okay, and we'll leave it there because we'll touch on it a little in a moment. Nanette, go ahead, unmute.
Yeah. So, Rabbi, I'm reading Dr. Rabbi Abraham Twersky,
Yeah.
and they're Hasidic, right? So, according to him, he has Moses going to the land, and he also has Joshua going to the land. Each one has their men. So, first of all, is that true? Secondly, he has Moses's men saying, Oi, Gavalt, they're so big, we can't do it. But then he has Joshua's men saying, Yeah, we'll figure out how we're going to do it.
So
In other words, Moses says, Oh, forget it. And his men say, Forget it. But Joshua and his men say, Let's just figure it out. We'll figure out how we're going to go. Is this true?
no, I'm going with the text here, and the text the text in very spare retelling is Moses dispatches 12 scouts. They scout, they spend 40 days, they come back, they're holding the fruit, and I'm going to go right into the fruit now. And they say it's a land flowing with milk and honey, and here is the fruit. And then they start basically trashing the land, not trashing it. They say, look, we're never going to be able to conquer it because you have these very difficult foes in the land, and basically we are not matched to them.
Wait, so
And
Rabbi, so you're saying forget Chabad because they're
not saying
just doing
forget
their.
about it. I'm saying I'm interested in what the text is saying right now, and that's my focus. And I'm gonna hold off those other interpretations because I want to focus on what the story itself says rather than the layers and layers and layers of interpretation, which are not my interest. Now, my interest is the story. I want to go back to the story, and the story says at the beginning, okay, which is here. The story says Moses charges them, and you can sense in the way that he tells them what to do. Um, go back to chapter 13 here. Okay, what's his charge? He says, uh, "See the land, what it's like. The population, strong, weak, few, many. Where are they settled? Good, ill. Are the towns like where they settled? Where their encampments or fortified places? What is the life? Fat, lean, trees, not." And so part of my question here is, is he I mean, he's the leader. And he wants a good report. He wants he wants them to come back and say, God promised us a good land just like God promised us, right? And we have the proof of it, and here's the proof. And everybody's going to go like sing hallelujah and dance and ready. We are, they're going to, this is in my imagination, the scenario that Moses imagines is I want to have a ceremony. Okay. I want to dispatch a representative. And I've talked about this before. This is a political moment. This is a persuasive, this is, forgive me for even saying it, it's a propaganda moment. Okay. He wants to generate a team of people who will motivate public opinion because I think Moses understands in order to do this project, I have to get the public opinion on my side. Okay. You know, I'm not a deep student of political science, but here's what we all know now, in observing our present moment, which is public opinion has to be with you. And you need the support. You can't fight a war. You can't do a campaign. You can't enact a policy. You can't do anything without the public on your side. Once you go against the public, you're set up for disaster. Okay? Disaster can play itself out in all sorts of ways. When we are civilized, we play it out in debate and the proper mechanisms of, governance. When we are in terrible crisis, we play it out with violence, and we see that. But here, this story is about public opinion, okay? And he's galvanizing a representative of each tribe to be part of the story, and that's a brilliant idea, except for one thing. It could all blow up in your face, which it does. Because he doesn't say, you think I read in the charge that he gives to the scouts, come back with this answer. Tell us that it's a good land. Tell us that it's a fat land. Tell us that the people there can be mowed over. Tell us that you'll be able to inhabit cities that are fortified with relative ease, and you will live happily ever after. That's what I want you to do. I mean, I read that in, even though he's creating the binaries on is it fat, is it skinny, is it many, is it weak, is it da 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 da. Even though he's creating, it's obvious that to me at least, it's obvious that he wants them to come back with a positive view because otherwise, what's the point? And the scouts, And this, I don't have a satisfactory answer for this question. Of course, they come back and they say at the beginning what we might interpret as the right things, and then everything goes askew. And the problem is they have no alternative because what's the alternative? Go back to Egypt? And that becomes a kind of symbolic message of what demagoguery is. Demagoguery is we're gonna shift public opinion against the leader, but not offer a compelling alternative. Okay, so now I focused in my thinking about what it means for a group of people to go on a journey, okay, and uh, just a second, I'm going back all the way to my beginning of my AI here. My AI, there we go. So I was trying to ask questions about this for AI, okay? And I'm going to this is this is where I started. And I want to take you on this journey here because there's biblical it's interesting as far as the Bible is concerned. It's interesting in terms of my idiosyncratic approach, but I think it's an approach that many of us share too. It's interesting in terms of how to study. How is a new generation of people going, how are we in this new technology going to use tools available to us to ask questions and to study the Torah? And the last question is, what do we what do we make out of all of this? So here we go. Here I'm going to take you on this little journey. All right. So my question is, can you give me examples of explorers? And I was interested in the fact that they bring back fruit. Okay. Can you give me examples of explorers in history who returned with items they procured from places they explored? When Columbus returned to Spain, what did he bring with him? How is the information documented? Okay. Yes, many explorers. This is AI. Throughout history, return home with items, plants, animals, people, artifacts, and other goods they acquired during their voyages. These objects often had significant cultural, scientific, and economic value. Here's a look at some notable explorers, including Christopher Columbus, and what they brought back. And I'm missing Christopher Columbus and what they brought back and how these items are. So Columbus, he brought back gold trinkets, tobacco, turkeys, cotton, pineapples, parrots, people, flora and fauna. And it's documented in his letter to Louis de Santangel, a key financer of the voyage, his diary, and the Spanish Royal Archive. So these are things that are documented. The explorer brings back things. The scouts bring back things. Okay, and here Herman Cortez, gold and silver, codices and idols, vanilla and cacao, Aztec artifacts. I want you to pay attention here to especially the I guess it would be the commodities, edibles, foodstuffs that they bring. Okay, here he's bringing back flora and fauna, pineapples, cotton, tobacco, and here they're bringing back vanilla and cacao. Walter Raleigh, tobacco, potatoes, maize. James Cook, artifacts, live animals and plant specimens, and we get documentations in journal. Lewis and Clark, notes and maps, plants and animals. Okay, so you got an AI will sum it up for you. So I'm interested in the plants because the scouts bring back are supposed to bring back fruit. So and these were all accounts in the you know post in the post Renaissance era, the pre modern era. So then I ask AI, do we have any accounts of early expeditions from any culture, excuse me, from the late, say the Bronze Era, which is the biblical era? I'm sorry. I got to get back to screen sharing. I do this again. So the late Bronze Era and accounts of what they may have found, and then the answer. So we have lots of examples: Egyptian expeditions, gold, Myrrh trees, frankincense, ebony, ivory. What kinds of biological, things are they bringing back? Animals. Resins. Okay. Mesopotamia. This is, about 7 or 8 centuries ahead of earlier than the biblical era. Timber, metal, stone. Assyrian, cedar, exotic animals. Minoans, our biblical era. Metals, pottery, dyes, perfumes, and oils. Okay. The trade routes extended to they being beads, ivory, carnelian, lapis lazuli, so minerals and specimens of stone. Okay, so now what do all of those things have in common? Close the text. So this is my observation. Okay, my observation is when you take woods and resins and dyes and uh, cacao and vanilla beans and you put them in one category and grapes in another category, what's the difference? Let me refine the question, make it even
One's
simpler.
live.
What's that?
The grapes are live.
Grapes are live. And what's the shelf? I do the experiment. I continue. I'll just continue the AI challenge here. So they asked me, "Would you like?" I said, "I want to locate the biblical story in the expedition of the 12 within the context of the era, specifically curious about how conventional or extraordinary it would be to be charged with bringing back fruit from the land of Canaan to the people of Israel who are sojourning to the. How realistic a scenario would it have been, considering that the fruit would have spoiled? What could have been the rationale for bringing back the fruit? You buy grapes in the store, okay? If you leave them on your counter for a day, maybe 2 days, they'll go rotten. Okay, first you get fruit flies, but then who would want to eat them? They get musty. They get all You need to put them in the fridge.
Grapes spoil quickly, but not pomegranates and
Fine.
figs.
Hold on. Okay, so let's what. So he puts the answer for me: historical context of grapes, realistic. So the answer is yes, and quite conventional. The Egyptians, Hittites, Assyrians frequently sent advance parties to survey lands. Egyptian governors. So reconnaissance is conventional. What about bringing back fruit? Would it have made sense? Logically, yes, and symbolically. Geographical proximity, around fruits chosen, grapes, pomegranate, are all known late Bronze Age Canaanite staples. They would have been in season when they went, late summer, because the story imagines a July to August timing. These fruits can survive travel for several days, especially unripe or semi-ripe ones. Grapes in clusters and pomegranates have thick skins were valued precisely for this. So here AI is telling me it's plausible. And then the symbolism of it, he said, and this is interesting, the idea of the carrying a cluster on a pole could be understood ritually, echoing priestly processions evoking the Ark of the Covenant, also carried on poles. So the fruit is not just proof of productivity, it is embodied promise and maybe even a kind of first fruits tithe of the land not yet possessed. How do scholars view this? Logically possible, literary theological device. The fruit becomes contested evidence. So then it gives you the chart. So I'm asking this question now. I say, well, why do all translators assume that just because the cluster of grapes was carried by two people on a pole carrying frame or other carrying device, that it was because it was so large? It strikes me that there could be other reasons. For example, according to many sources and my anecdotal experience, grapes do not last outside of the refrigerator for more than a couple of days. These grapes would have gone bad soon after they were cut. Is the pole carrying frame a way to preserve them, to sun dry them, so that they would be able to bring them more or less intact to the people? So AI knows I have an ego and says, that's an excellent insight. And you're right to challenge the default assumption that the grapes were carried by two men solely because of their size. The image of the cluster of grapes carried on a pole, Numbers 13:23, has been traditionally understood as a sign of extraordinary fertility, but your interpretation opens a practical agronomic angle that is often overlooked. Let's unpack this with historical, botanical, and textual analysis. So here it gives me the Hebrew, a single cluster of grapes, vayisa'u b'amot b'shnaim, they carried it on a pole between two. There is no explicit statement that this was due to the sheer size or weight of the cluster, so I am right. How long do grapes last? In warm desert environments, they can start to ferment with or rot within 1 to 3 days. Sun exposure accelerates spoilage. Grape clusters, however, can be air dried into raisins if hung or spread in the sun, a technique that dates back thousands of years. In Canaan, sun drying grapes into raisins was a well known preservation method by the late Bronze Age. Raisins were portable, calorie dense, and valued both as food and offering. And we have examples of dried fruits later on in the Tanakh, in King David, when he was not, before he was king. So, what could the pole mean besides size? Preservation via air circulation, prevention of crushing or bruising, symbolic procession and display, division of labor, not weight. Why do translators focus on size? Visual drama, midrashic tradition, cultural symbolism. But no biblical narrative says the grapes are unusually large. The word mot, the pole, is neutral, could refer to any frame or shared carry not necessarily due to extreme. Right, your insight and summary, botanically and historically plausible, supported by ancient practices, more nuanced alternative to oversight cluster assumption, and possibly a double-layered image, practical preservation or procession. Okay, so I'm just gonna move for a second to I asked AI at the end of this to generate an image for me of the two because the image, this is another kind of redux of the Cecil B. DeMille, the Ten Commandments. The fact that we are so attuned to seeing the movie shifts the way we understand the story. And I would say the fact that we are so used to, and here I have to kind of salute the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, for making this their logo. We're so attuned to seeing the image of the large grapes from the logo of Carmel Wine and the logo of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism that we think automatically that this is the image. And so I want to share with you the AI generated image of the two scouts. This on the left, you have them holding a picture of the fat grapes, okay? The fat grapes, right? And you know how this literally and figuratively feeds the imagination because you want to give the impression that the land produces this rich abundance of fruit, okay, and that you can't, we still have this experience. I'll turn to Alana if she's still there. Alana, in a second, because Israelis, you know, have this such a sense of pride of the produce. Okay, I mean, it is delicious, and it's all we talk about when we're there. At least one of the things is just the food. It's just so tasty and beautiful and wonderful. And look at the big grapes. And look, in America, the grapes are tiny, the little champagne little grapes. Okay, but look at the big grape. Each grape the size of a melon. Okay, so what the AI didn't do here, which I would do, I would ask it to if I did it in a version 2, would be to refine the facial expressions of the tribe. Look at what what's so I don't want to say nauseating about this is that it's unimaginative. The faces are the same. They're the same face. It's like they probably just found a face from some illustration and just generated, facsimiles of it. And the gazes are expressionless. Okay, so on the left you have big fat grapes that are the size of tomatoes, and on the right you have raisins. Okay, and these are very, very big raisins. Okay, so they're unusually big, and it wouldn't look like this, and there would be more raisins on the vine than that. Okay, so much for the AI generated image. But here's the issue. The issue is in all of those examples from antiquity and the post Renaissance, the explorers, the the things that they brought that were either botanical in nature or foods were all preserved. They were all easy to preserve. They were all things that that you could transport with ease a vanilla bean, okay, a cacao pod. So the experience of somebody would be transferred to the explorer, say, look, you're going to take this, or we can take this because over the journey of weeks and months, you'll bring it back to Spain or wherever you're going, and it will more or less be intact. And there were probably people who knew how to keep plants, certainly. In the 16th century, they knew how to keep a plant alive for the duration of a journey. But I doubt that the spies had the knowledge or the wherewithal or the capability to keep grapes fresh till, for the 40 day or even for 3 days. Okay. So perhaps a plausible thing is they brought raisins. And perhaps they brought figs for sure spoil quickly. And pomegranates do not. But pomegranates also can be dried and they become actually quite an interesting delicacy. Okay. Let me go on with my little AI exploration and I will illustrate more with this. Okay. Back to this. All right. So I asked follow-up questions. Here we go. Before we go into that, let's talk about the pomegranates and figs. Typically, when do pomegranates ripen? Figs. What is their spoilage time in the summer heat? Would they have been dried as well in antiquity? And what purpose would raisins, dried pomegranate, arils, or dried figs have had on the return of the scouts? How would they have been interpreted by Moses and the people in light of all the anticipation about the goodness of the land? So again, it likes to stroke my ego. You're asking just the right questions to uncover the agricultural, symbolic, and logistical richness of the story. Let's look closely at each of the fruits mentioned: pomegranates, figs, and grapes. Harvest timing, perishability, ancient preservation, symbolic theological meaning, interpretation by Moses and the people. Figs, late June, early August. Spoilage, extremely perishable, 1 to 2 days. Preservation, widely dried into cakes, sweet, durable, compact, often appear in Egyptian and Canaanite records. Pomegranates, late summer, early fall. Early fruit may just be appearing. They might be at the first fruit phase. So this is interesting. The time of harvest of the grapes does not necessarily coincide with the ripening of pomegranates. This is a narrative question mark, okay? Pomegranates can last for weeks. If opened, 1 to 2 days in heat. The seeds could be dried, though not less commonly than figs or grapes, used in wine, syrup as dried seeds in some ancient cuisines. They represent fertility and sanctity. Grapes, ripening season, June to August, 2 to 3 days, sun-dried into raisins, major food and trade item used in offerings, cakes, and travel rations. Okay, so we have all of this. How would these be interpreted by Moses and the people? They would serve as tangible proof that the land is indeed good. They would have sight, taste, texture, and color. But irony and reversal, symbols of promise and fear and rebellion. They believe the fearful report over the fruitful proof, tragic drama, mistrust. Okay, so I'm going to just go plow on here. Maybe the fruit plays a role in storytelling. Here's where I get my own, literary sensibility. Maybe there is a literary role here because I, what I'm discovering here is that it is becoming less and less plausible to me that they brought a big, big cluster of grapes because they would go bad pretty quickly. Less likely that they would have brought big, full pomegranates because it wasn't the season. And less likely that they would have brought ripe figs because the figs would have gone bad in 1 to 2 days. So what's going on here? I have to ask a literary question. And sure enough, I have a really strong literary question. Notice that the bringing of the fruit is the final thing that Moses charges them to do. Ulekachtem mipri haaretz. That's the last thing he says. And notice the reports of the scouts is cutting a cluster of grapes and procuring the pomegranates and figs. Notice that the final thing showing the fruit comes after telling the report. I could go back to the text and show you that the fruit is always at the end of the section. Ulekachtem et Priya Arts, that's at the end of his charge. They show them the fruit, that's at the end of their tell and show phase. The talking about the fruit is at the end, it's the final thing that they do. So the fruit plays a literary role here. I ask, if my intuition is correct, that this is a literary device, A, what is the name of that literary device? And B, where would I find other examples of this literary device to illustrate this better and buttress my intuition? In other words, I'm saying, forgive me, this is the way you tell a story. You punch it and punctuate it with one item that serves as the motif of the story. That is as plain as Mary had a little lamb. It's as plain as the three pigs, as the three bears, Goldilocks. It's just a law of storytelling. You always have a motif that you go back to. Every storyteller and every comedian knows this. Okay, thank you for the ego boosting here. Your intuition is excellent. Literary pattern, highly intentional, rhetorical narrative device. What's the name? Climax. Duh. Okay, not really. It's more like this. It's a modified inclusio. That's not as interesting to me as what happens afterwards. So he shows examples. They show example of just other kinds of things where these motifs occur. Joseph's Moses signs, Rachav's scarlet cords, David and Goliath. I'm not sure exactly that it fits what I want. So I'm going to just skip over this. Okay. I want to go to this expression of land with milk and honey. Many interpret it to be a traditional phrase for the fruitfulness of the promised land. But the Israeli botanist Noga Haruveni offers a compelling idea in his book, Nature and Our Biblical Heritage, that the phrase describes uncultivated areas cultivated with wild vegetation and a profusion of flowers. In other words, a great place for shepherds. How should we understand this phrase? You're absolutely right, blah, blah, blah. The traditional fertility view, milk, goat's milk, honey, date syrup, but it's not. Here, milk and honey refers to not settled agriculture, but to the natural bounty of wild, uncultivated landscapes, specifically flower-covered hills, wild herbs, and spontaneous vegetation. Honey is wild bee honey, which would proliferate in rocky clefts, trees, and flowering bushes and uncultivated regions, seasonally abundant and accessible to foragers and shepherds. Milk from goats and sheep, and in uncultivated areas with wild forage, pastoralism thrives. So milk here is a product of natural pasturage, not of domesticated fodder. Thus, Haruveni's phrase describes a land rich not in plowed fields and vineyards, but in natural, renewable, and non-extractive abundance. I'm just going to stop here for a second because it's a big theme that again, because of our popular imagination and popular culture, especially with the Hora, Eretz Avachalav, and the idea that it's Eretz Avachalav is such a poetic, phrase that reflects you think about it as, rivers of milk and rivers of honey, and you think that is what's going on here. But in fact, what it is pasture land. That it says this is a land rich with pasture, perfect for a nomadic people who descends from pastoral nomads who raise sheep in abundance and goats and offer them as sacrifices constantly at the temple. So you have a land full of that, and you also have a land of fruit and potential. The potential to structure this land and develop the land. That's what the fruit is about. This is a land filled with flowing milk and honey, meaning you can pasture your sheep, and a land that has some fruit in it, meaning that you have the potential to develop here in orchards and further economic development. It would almost be the same as saying to someone who's looking at a piece of raw land for development and saying, This is where you can put your residential area. This is where you can put your industrial area. This is where you can put your shopping area. This is where you can put your cultural area. Look at this whole, it's like going out to, Las Vegas before it was Las Vegas and, whatever the legend of the founders of Las Vegas. Here we have this, we're going to build a city here and America is going to flock to it. This is going to be the main avenue with all the hotels, and you'll be able to fly in or drive in or whatever, travel in. You'll stay three, whatever, how many nights you want. You'll gamble, your heart's content. You'll eat till you can't stop eating, and you'll see Elvis and Frank Sinatra, and you'll see comedians, and that's what the dream is. And that's how you sell real estate. You sell on a dream. So they're selling the dream here. At the one point, he's saying, and you can just the cruelty is just so intense because they're saying, look, the land is perfect. The land is pastoral nomad. You can pasture your sheep and has potential for all sorts of orchards. However, there's one small fact you need to know about. There are people that live there, enemies. They're big, they're strong, and they're gonna defeat you. And there are wild animals there also. So you're in trouble. Okay. Now I'm gonna go to a couple of more items. We're over. Okay. I'm just gonna move beyond this. Okay, let's go back to the fruit. To the best of my knowledge, once they present the fruit does not appear in the story anymore. The story pivots to the foreboding nature of the inhabitants and the prospect of conflict in trying to possess it. This creates the crisis and the resolution resulting in 40 years of wandering. Fast forward to Deuteronomy. Might we see the first fruits declaration? Deuteronomy 26, where the pilgrim brings fruit to the temple as a kind of antithesis or remediation to the scouts episode. Would the annual declaration of the pilgrim expressing gratitude for the land be a kind of permanent correction or remediation to the debacle of the scouts? And then it says, yes, your reading is exceptionally perceptive, blah, 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 blah. It's liturgical repair. Okay? And so and I ask them, he goes into this and I ask the next question, are there other commentators who have observed this? He says there aren't. That's a bad sign for me. Okay. Nobody else has had this. It's a good sign, a bad sign. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask him one more question. We are going in an interesting direction. So we have the first fruits declaration as a liturgical repair of the Scouts debacle and the day of purgation rituals as a liturgical repair of golden calf and the plating of the altar as a kind of liturgical repair of the Korahite rebellion, which is coming up. Would there be any examples of liturgical repair of the sins of Israelites in the Torah? And so that's where I'm going with it. Okay. And I so what I'm offering here is, and it goes on and on and on. And we're way out of we're off the topic here. But finally, I then ask it to do the following. I said, could you give me a class outline for all this information? And it did. But I went off of it. So the theory that I'm putting forward here is that this is a horrible, horrible moment. And as usual, the story's in the details. I think the fruit is a very important detail because it raises all these questions that make it literary. The fruit is the punctuated thematic motif of the story. And that it ignites for me an imaginative journey that something, in fact, does happen with fruit later on in the biblical story on an annual basis. Namely, the pilgrim farmer comes to the temple bearing his fruits, and in his declaration says, basically, thank you for this beautiful land. Thank you for giving me this beautiful land, which is the antithesis, the exact opposite of what the spies say. The scouts say, yeah, land, flowing milk and honey, but it's going to kill us. And here the pilgrim says, It's a land that you have given. We wandered, where father was a wandering Aramean, and you brought me to this land, and here I am with the fruits of this land. I am part of this development of this land. And it's a moment of great gratitude and identification. And to me, it's the what the AI calls liturgical repair. It's the opposite, but it's my intuition that the AI loves to validate. And that I want to talk about for a second, the content of this and then the feeling that I have from this. I know we're over, but go ahead, Lana. Go ahead.
I'm curious how would the AI react to the fact of Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, that God did not like the fruits that Hevel sacrificed, but he took what Cain gave.
So what it's likely to do is it go what I've learned here is that AI just basically processes all of the information that's out there and kind of helps frame it and deliver it and understand it. So, then it asks you, do you want to explore these interpretations? Do you want to see these interpretations? Look, there are hundreds and hundreds of interpretations of these stories. What is accessible to us, what makes sense, etc. So what I did here was I had my question. I needed data from from ancient sources that I just don't have familiarity with. I just don't know enough about ancient Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt or ancient Greece I don't know enough about the explorers. I don't know what they brought back, but I have a hunch. I have a hunch that A, they all bring back something, and B, they're not bringing back fresh fruit, okay? Because it's all spoils. So my question was, you'll forgive me, what the hell is it doing in the Bible? What the hell is it doing in the story? Why is he bringing back a fresh cluster of grapes? Then you could say, well, it's a miracle. God is a miracle. It's a miracle. Wonder, miracle, miracle. Of course it's a miracle. But if it's a story, then I have to relate to it with, so I have my eyes. So then if they're bringing back raisins and dried figs and dried pomegranate seeds, then okay, so there's something sweet and tasty about that. And there's it's also not impressive. A raisin is not impressive as a grape, I think. Okay, it's very nutritious, but it just doesn't capture the imagination like grapes do. Okay, my point is something something's going on here in the story, and then that leads me to ask, well, where are other fruit in the Torah? Okay. So I have a few other examples of fruit in the Torah, namely Adam and Eve take a fruit. Um, the brothers of Joseph, interestingly, when they go down to Egypt on the second round to procure grain, they bring things from the land that will be a gift to him that include almonds, botnim, which we translate as peanuts, but they were some kind of other nut, laudanum, some kind of, other kind of dried herb fragrant. In other words, even Jacob understood that to give things from the land, they had to be, an almond can last forever, basically. I mean, what do you need to keep an almond? An almond will survive in very hot weather, and ground up flowers will survive. There and ointments and balms. These are things that are naturally preserved. But you don't bring. He didn't say bring back pomegranates and olives. And it's interesting that olives are not on the list here of things, and olives and dates are not on the list. That's that would have been a very interesting thing. They're not among the fruits that they bring back. And so the fact that basically Jacob said, here's some nuts and herbs, dried herbs, says to me that they were smart enough to know what preserve was. So is Moses not being conscientious enough by saying bring back the fruit? Or is he saying bring back dried fruit or bring back something, bring back a symbol? And so it's a story. And so again, where I'm going with both on the biblical level and also, rabbinic, my homiletical thing is, yeah, it's interesting. This was the crisis that broke the story of the tribes of the wandering in the desert, lasted 40 years now. And then like Yom Kippur is an annual repentance for a sin that leaves its residue in the people forever, idolatry, and which condenses around it all other sins and makes us think about correcting our lives. This sin of not trusting God and not trusting the plan that God has for us requires a kind of repair on an annual basis through the bringing of the first fruits. I think it's a very compelling answer, and I'm shocked, frankly, that no one else has written about it that AI could generate. So you heard it here first. Okay. We'll leave it there, but let me see if you have any questions or want to react to it. Go ahead. Anybody? No comments. We have I think so let me ask you I want if you take 2 minutes, which is
Can I?
yeah, go ahead.
No, because the Torah mentions Shivat Aminim, the seven kinds of fruit that are
Absolutely.
very
Absolutely.
important.
Very, very important. Yes. And so that becomes the symbol of the land. So as an exercise in AI, okay, let me ask you, how do you feel about, or Stanley, you have a question. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I just want to respond to that. I'm astounded by it. It
Yeah.
is an amazing technique. I was skeptical at first, and I read about how it can do stupid things and so on. Your questions were very specific, they were very sophisticated, they were complicated, and you got answers that really made sense. As far as I know, they were accurate. If you told me they're
Okay.
not accurate,
That's the issue.
then I would be concerned. But
Okay.
short of that, it's really something
So
phenomenal.
I, in preparing this, I was blown away. I'm blown away by this. Um, and I have, that's one set of reaction is like, I'm thinking, it's over. It's over for me. Okay. Because this technology can do it better. On the other hand, your question, it's my question, which is, do I trust this? Do I trust the information that it's giving me? And can I verify it? And on some level I do, but I asked I cross-examined it and I found other things in it. So on the one hand, it can give me just torrents of information. On the other hand, I need to be sophisticated in my questioning and I need to be trustworthy, which is telling me here's my little theme, which is going to be a big theme because it's happening right now as we speak. Folks, we're in a revolution. We're in the middle of a revolution. And the revolution means that all of this is available to you. And God bless us all. We can all do this, on our own. I could spend a whole day having a conversation with AI on this, provided I paid the money for it and got the right program, etc. I can spend hours and hours and hours on this. Will I trust it? And what do I do with it? And how does this information then get translated to the public sphere? When I stand up as a rabbi now and preach a sermon, are people going to ask me if it's for me or if it was generated? Now, that means that the authentic experience that people crave, I really think that people really crave authenticity, is going to be in great demand. So my positive, optimistic outlook from the AI revolution is that people are going to understand, it'll take a while for them to understand this, how powerful this technology is, and they're going to understand how necessary it is to have community and real interaction with people, real teachers, real knowledge, real wisdom, fast learning and slow learning, and character building, and also information and modeling, these are going to be real assets. So what I sense people will need, and I already see signs of this, is that it's not that people are going to start, coming to synagogues and learning in droves, but a certain kind of individual is going to say, I can't, I can't take the falsehood anymore. I can't take the sense of wondering whether or not you're lying to me or whether or not you're pretending. I want a real experience. I want a real teacher. I want a real person. I don't want to have my information generated to me by a machine and or by technology. And it's important, it's valuable, etc. It gives me access to everything, but I still want human interaction. That's
We face the same thing in psychology, by the way.
absolutely,
AI
absolutely.
is doing amazing things in responding to people, let's say in therapy, that it's hard to distinguish between the responses that chat, whatever, will give and a human therapist will
Yeah,
give.
yeah.
So, what do you do with that? You then say, well, now, wonderful, we can treat everyone and we can sit on the sidelines and generate the programs and the
Everybody
invention.
needs you
But
need,
if you're right, then people are going to say, no, no, I that's not what I want. I want a human interaction, and I don't want something that is pretending to be a human interaction or something like that, you know?
I think people will still want, because we're human beings, we
Yeah.
still want to be with human beings.
Yeah, I think you're right. But
And
I
and
hope
I
you're
think
right about it.
my people like me, everyone here, our role here is to reinforce the validity of the human experience and to say how wonderful it is to be wrong and to be corrected and to be mentored and to experience the question. I mean, AI can't reproduce my voice, you know, AI cannot reproduce my enthusiasm and my curiosity, and that's where my humanity is. And AI will not be able to ask the questions that you all ask, um, because this is a very human endeavor. And that's where we're going to leave it, folks. So this was a good
Okay.
explanation. And we'll
Thank
see you. So
you.
next week we're going to be on, and then I think next week is going to be our last week. All right. We'll stop there.